But I have to say that, all due credit to sobriety, I wouldn't be here if it weren't for that.
You don't care about anything when you're loaded, trust me. Whole different trip. All you care about is getting your next fix, then dealing with what you got to deal with until you get your next fix.
At the height of Guns N' Roses, one woman looked at Slash's life and decided she couldn't be part of it anymore. Fame was exploding, the headlines were nonstop, and the chaos surrounding him only kept growing. She walked away, convinced there was no future left to save. Most people thought that was the end of their story. It wasn't. 26 years later, she came back, surprising fans who never knew she had remained one of the most important people in his life. So who was the woman who left Slash? And what brought her back after more than 2 decades? Join us as we uncover the remarkable story behind one of rock's most unexpected love stories. Before the top hat. Before the fame. Growing up around artists meant Slash understood what it was to be famous from an early age. What he never expected was that his own success would push him to the edge and nearly make him lose the most important person in his life. Saul Hudson, better known as Slash, got his famous nickname as a child from actor Seymour Cassel, a close family friend. Seymour noticed the young Saul was always rushing from one thing to the next, never able to sit still, so he started calling him Slash. Neither of them could have imagined that the playful childhood nickname would one day become one of the most recognizable and controversial names in rock music. Slash was always surrounded by music and family right from childhood. He grew up in a household fully immersed in the entertainment industry. His mother designed album covers for Ringo Starr and David Bowie, while his father worked as an art director. It wasn't out of the norm when he started playing guitar at 15. By the time he was 20, he had joined Guns N' Roses, and that was the beginning of both his success and his downfall. In July 1987, Guns N' Roses released its debut album, Appetite for Destruction, which sold over 28 million copies worldwide, 18 million in the United States alone, making it the best-selling debut album of all time in America. In the summer of 1988, the band achieved its only U.S. #1 hit with Sweet Child O' Mine, a song built around the guitar riff that Slash described as a joke exercise he had been noodling with, a warm-up pattern that the rest of the band immediately recognized as something real. And in the middle of all of this, in the months when Appetite for Destruction was consuming the world and Guns N' Roses was becoming impossible to ignore, Slash met a girl named Megan Hodges. He was around 23, she was 19, and the story that began in 1989 is the one that everything else in his personal life has been orbiting ever since. But before we get to Megan, you need to understand the world she walked into and then walked away from. So what was actually happening inside that band during the years when it was at its most powerful and most destructive? The band that almost destroyed everyone inside it. Guns N' Roses at its peak was simultaneously the most exciting and the most dangerous environment in rock music. The band had gone from sleeping on Sunset Strip to selling out stadiums in less than 2 years, a trajectory so steep and so fast that nobody inside it had time to adjust. Slash's drug and alcohol use during this period was not a secret. He has been open about it across multiple interviews and in his 2007 autobiography. In 1989, during a show as an opening act for the Rolling Stones, Axl Rose threatened to leave the band if certain members did not stop what he described as dancing with Mr. Brownstone, a direct reference to heroin use within the group. The song Mr. Brownstone from Appetite for Destruction was itself a barely veiled account of the band's relationship with the drug. It was into this world that Megan Hodges arrived in 1989. She was very young and Slash was not yet the figure of mythology he would later become. But he was already in the middle of something growing faster than anyone around it could manage. Former band manager Alan Niven described Megan as Slash's 19-year-old girlfriend, who bailed on him because it was so extremely crazy. She was not leaving because she did not care about him. She was leaving because the thing he was in the middle of was not survivable from the inside. She made a rational decision about her own life, and she walked away. What happened to Slash in the years that followed her departure is one of the most well-documented personal histories in rock music. He kept playing. The band kept growing. The excesses kept escalating. And somewhere inside all of it, the absence of the person who had chosen her own sanity over staying in his orbit was a thing he carried even when everything else around him was loud enough to drown almost anything out. Now, here is the part that most people have not thought deeply about, because it happened between his first wife and his second, and got relatively little sustained attention. So who did Slash marry first? What nearly killed him? And how did a phone call about a prenuptial agreement lead to a defibrillator being used on his chest? The night he almost died. In 1990, Slash's bandmate Duff McKagan persuaded him to go out to a bar in Los Angeles on a night when Slash would have otherwise stayed home or in the studio. At the bar that night, Duff met a girl. The girl had a friend with her named Renee Suran. Renee Suran was an international model that was managed by Elite Model Management in Los Angeles. She was poised, professional, and substantially different in character from the world Slash was operating in at peak Guns N' Roses. When Slash was introduced to her, Renee did not show much interest in him initially, which Slash found appealing as a challenge. Within a few weeks, the pair had started living together. She moved into her home on Valley Vista, a property that had been purchased by her late father. On October 10, 1992, Slash married Renee Suran in Marina del Rey, California. The marriage was turbulent from early on. Slash and Renee temporarily split up due to his infidelity in 1992 during Guns N' Roses' European tour with Faith No More and Soundgarden. They got back together, but the reunion did not stabilize what was underneath. The moment that came closest to ending Slash's life permanently came from a phone call about a prenuptial agreement. Slash told Howard Stern in a 2001 interview, "The beginning of the end was when I said, 'Sign this prenup.' I remember exactly where that was. I was in San Francisco. Guns was touring the stadiums with Metallica, and the phone call was made that there was going to be a prenup. That was one of the biggest fights in our entire relationship over the phone. It stressed me out so bad that after the show was over, I ran into the wrong people at the wrong time after the gig, and I ended up in the hospital, messing around because I was so depressed from the whole argument that I ended up overdosing that night." Axl Rose later told Slash how scared he was that night, saying he thought he would have to find a new guitarist. Fortunately, Slash survived. Paramedics used defibrillators to bring him back, and then he went back to work like nothing happened. The marriage to Renee continued for 5 years before ending in divorce in 1997. Renee subsequently continued her career in acting and modeling, appearing in the autobiographical film Private Parts in 1997, in an episode of Baywatch Nights in 1997, and later joining the web series Broken at Love in 2013, in which she appeared between 2013 and 2021. She also joined the podcast series Forever and a Day in 2020. What nobody was paying close attention to during the years between the first marriage and the second was that Megan Hodges had not disappeared from Slash's world entirely. She had made her own life, and Slash was moving toward the next chapter of his personal one, the comeback from a terrible pattern. Slash married Perla Ferrar on October 15, 2001, in Hawaii. They have 2 sons together, London, and Cash, and they all lived together in San Fernando Valley. Slash was still recording and touring extensively, but the domestic structure around the second marriage was more conventional than anything the first had produced. The marriage lasted 13 years on paper, though not without significant strain. Slash filed for divorce from Perla in August 2010, but the couple reconciled 2 months later. In December 2014, he again filed for divorce. The second filing was the permanent one. What was happening simultaneously, while the second marriage was in its final stage, was that Megan Hodges had also reached the end of her own marriage to Mark Knight, a musician. Megan had previously married Mark Knight, with whom she had 2 daughters, Scarlett Knight and Lucy Blue Knight. Slash reconnected with Megan in January 2015, less than a month after he and his second wife had separated. The woman who had walked away from him in 1989 because the situation was too crazy to survive. Inside was now walking back in, 26 years later, into a different version of the same man she had known as a young woman. Since January 2015, Hodges and Slash, along with her 2 daughters, have been living together in Slash's mansion in San Fernando, Los Angeles. Perla Ferrar, Slash's second wife, accused Megan Hodges of being the other woman who interfered in their relationship at the time of their marriage. This is the version of the story that Perla has presented publicly. What is documented is that Megan and Slash reconnected in January 2015, and that the divorce from Perla was filed in December 2014. But there is a layer to this reunion that most coverage of Slash and Megan never fully explores. A piece of the story that connects the personal and the professional in a way that is genuinely remarkable. Because Megan Hodges' return to Slash's life did not just change his personal situation, it changed the entire trajectory of rock history. So what role did Megan play in one of the most talked about rock reunions of the entire decade? The woman who got Axl and Slash back in the same room. The reunion between Axl Rose and Slash has been described across music journalism as one of the most improbable reconciliations in the history of rock. The 2 men had not spoken in person since 1996. Their mutual hostility across the 20 years that followed had generated headlines, lawsuits, and a sustained public feud that most observers had concluded was permanent. Interestingly, the seed of the reunion was planted through the women around both men. Megan Hodges had a best friend who lived in Atlanta named Erin Everly. Erin Everly had been Axl Rose's wife. Megan reconnecting with Slash meant that Erin and Axl were talking again. Former band manager Alan Niven later described it directly. That was the seed for getting Axl and Slash back together. It was Erin and Megan. The Not in This Lifetime reunion tour was announced in 2016, with Slash and Duff McKagan rejoining Guns N' Roses. The band performed for the first time with Slash in 23 years during a secret warm-up gig at the Troubadour in Los Angeles on April 1, 2016. The tour became one of the most successful in rock history, grossing $584 million by its conclusion in 2019. $584 million. And the chain of events that led to it started with Megan Hodges having a best friend in Atlanta and coming back into Slash's life after 26 years. So what does Slash actually say about Megan in his own words? And what does the relationship look like now that he is 60 years old, and it has been running for a decade in its second chapter? What Slash has said about her. Slash is not a person who gives long, emotionally detailed interviews about his personal life. He is private by instinct, expressive through his guitar rather than through words, and generally more comfortable talking about music than about anything else. What he has given instead of declarations is something more durable. A decade of consistent public presence, alongside the woman who knew him before any of the mythology existed. In September 2025, at the opening night of Universal Studios Hollywood's Halloween Horror Nights, Slash appeared on the red carpet alongside Megan. Slash, 60 years old, wore a black Evil Dead tank, ripped jeans, aviator shades, and sneakers. Megan, 56, wore a black graphic tee, wide-leg trousers, and a baseball cap. The two posed side by side with the ease of people who have been beside each other long enough that a camera is just another thing in the room. The Lovebirds, who first dated back in 1989, reconnected in 2015 and have been together ever since, posed effortlessly, side by side. The Halloween Horror Nights appearance was not accidental. Slash has been back for the 7th straight year, creating original music for the park's haunted experience, composing scores for horror attractions, and staying engaged with the broadest possible version of his own creative output. Megan has been beside him through all of it. Megan Hodges is known for her work as a music photographer, often chronicling bands during shows, and as an active Instagram presence with a substantial following. Despite her connection to one of rock's most iconic figures, she has maintained a private personal life, keeping details about her family largely away from the public eye. What they have presented publicly is a decade of consistent companionship. Her social media shows a life that includes music events, travel, and the domestic texture of a household in San Fernando Valley, where her 2 daughters from her previous marriage have been part of the picture since 2015. The question of why Megan specifically is the person who came back gets answered when you look at the full arc of what happened between 1989 and 2015. She was there before the mythology made him untouchable. She knew Saul Hudson before most of the world knew Slash. And the version of her that returned in 2015 was a woman who had lived her own full life in the intervening decades, raised children, had her own marriage, built her own identity, and came back not from need, but from choice. While the personal story is the one most people want to follow, what has been happening in Slash's professional life since the Guns N' Roses reunion is equally worth understanding. No slowing down. In 2021, Slash appeared on his first songs with Guns N' Roses since 1994, Absurd and Hard School. In 2023, the band went on tour again, notably playing both the Glastonbury Festival in England and the Power Trip Festival in Indio, California. Alongside the Guns N' Roses work, Slash released Orgy of the Damned in 2024, a blues covers album featuring a roster of guest vocalists including Brian Johnson of AC/DC, Paul Rogers, Chris Stapleton, Gary Clark Jr., and Iggy Pop. The record is a statement about where Slash's musical identity actually originates, in the blues tradition that runs beneath all of Guns N' Roses' rock output, and about his ability to attract collaborators who are themselves at the top of their fields. Time magazine named him runner-up to Jimi Hendrix on their list of the 10 best electric guitar players in 2009. Rolling Stone placed him at number 65 on their list of the 100 greatest guitarists of all time in 2011. Guitar World ranked his guitar solo in November Rain number 6 on their list of the 100 greatest guitar solos in 2008. And Total Guitar placed his riff in Sweet Child O' Mine at number 1 on their list of the 100 greatest riffs. Slash is an honorary board member of Little Kids Rock, a national nonprofit that works to restore and rejuvenate music education programs in disadvantaged public schools. He has visited Little Kids Rock students, played with them, and donated instruments and his time. He is also a board trustee of the Greater Los Angeles Zoo Association and has long supported the Los Angeles Zoo. The man at 60 is substantially different from the man who nearly died from an overdose in a San Francisco hotel room after a fight about a prenuptial agreement. The excesses that defined the Guns N' Roses era of his life have been replaced by a version of discipline that the career requires and the personal life supports. He still has the top hat. He still has the Les Paul. He still plays with an intensity that most guitarists 2 decades younger cannot match. And he has Megan Hodges, who has now been beside him for 10 years in this chapter, and who was there at the very beginning of the chapter that preceded all the ones in between. Which part of Slash's story surprised you the most? Was it fate, or did they simply waste too much time before finding their way back to each other? Share your thoughts with us in the comments below. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.